Hi, I'm Metta Spencer, and I get to have a very interesting conversation today with two friends. My friend Subir Guin is here beside me, and he has introduced me to an old friend, family friend of his from Calcutta, where he was born. And this is Ashis Nandy, who is a fellow at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies in Delhi, India. And he tells me that he's been there 55 years. That is quite a record. You get a gold star for such a long performance. And I know I've heard that you are very well known throughout India for your work on development issues. So I want to explore with you. Say hello, Subir. I want to introduce you to Subir is a friend of mine who's on the editorial board of Peace Magazine. Since I don't need to introduce the two of you, I think you've known each other since childhood. Let me begin by saying that I think maybe we certainly want to ask your notions about development issues, since that is obviously part of your academic work.
Well, frankly speaking, I am no great admirer of development. I am for economic growth as long as it comes naturally as a part of the process through which many other countries have developed, so to speak. In the sense that these countries had centuries to develop, if not centuries, at least something like 150 to 200 years. My suspicion is this, that it has benefited the development experts and the corporations much more than it has helped the people of these countries. Because it is not natural, it requires experts. Experts require have their own requirements, and this is an unending process where most of the effort, most of the and most of the concern goes into a different kind of enterprise. For instance, nobody mentions, when they begin to talk of India's successful development these days, that during the last 73 years in independent India, 60 million people have been displaced by developmental programs for building dams, most of which are useless. We have more than 12,000 dams which we have built over the last 70 odd years. Out of them, something like 3,800 are mega dams. And all the mega dams were built on the basis of the argument that each dam was absolutely essential for India. Many of the dams are superfluous. The contractors, the builders, and the politicians rich. They have displaced indigenous people. They have displaced old-style communities, which were craftspeople, techno communities you could call them, and brought in a different concept of India where any intervention in society has to come from a centralized or body or centralized setup. This is not my concept of development.
You're not alone in your critique of all this dam building. I think 15, 20 years ago, we were beginning to hear books, or I was have books on my shelf from that period of people saying that these dams do more harm than good. And that, so I'm not totally surprised at that critique. But I'm also interested in something else that I've heard, and I don't know the rationale for it, but that a lot of Indian farmers have been committing suicide the last few years because they cannot make make a go of their farming. Is that part of this whole development project?
It is also a part of this developmental program, so to speak. Green revolution was introduced into India, and it was supposed to liberate the farmers. It has shackled the farmers more and more. In the last 25 years, nearly 300,000 farmers have committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big news anymore. It's not a big news because people have got accustomed to this. Because in these countries, certain kind of farming practices, farming techniques have become, so to speak, obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Traditional farming methods are not working.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the result is this, that you are dependent on biologically modified seeds,
Mm-hmm.
which you have to purchase every year, which for a poor Indian farmer is an enormous expense. Also, they increasingly get trapped into different kind of debts.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately they decide that if you commit suicide, at least your family will get some compensation from the regime.
Mm-hmm. The name that we hear here in North America in connection with that issue is always Vandana Shiva, as a person who's
She's a very good friend of mine.
leading the charge against the big Monsanto and the companies that hold patents on seeds, right? Mm-hmm. Are you in cahoots with her? Do you share the same attitude that she is promoting?
Yes, we have been in touch for the last 40 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I am also in touch with farmers groups, also in touch with others who are locked in this battle, people who try to work with farmers, and not only with the farmers, but with other kinds of techno communities, which try to live a more autonomous community life. India has no dearth of communities, and one of the problems with nation states is this: their first targets are always communities. The modern nation state, wherever it is, and increasingly so, do not want anything to stand between the state and the individual. And we are therefore in a position where we stand alone vis-a-vis the state and its powers. The ideal citizen is now only a passive citizen who takes interest in politics by sitting on a couch and viewing television news.
Mm-hmm.
That they get.
Mm-hmm.
And beautifully votes every fifth year or fourth year. And his job as a citizen and a politically active person is done.
Now, I guess that
development comes as a part of that package. Let's
Mm-hmm.
not forget that part of the story. It is centrally controlled by experts.
Mm-hmm.
The experts who have no direct touch with any farmer or farming or any productive process for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
It is theoretical knowledge and mathematically arrived at theories which dominate and control the economies now the world over.
Okay, that's a very interesting notion that you need these intermediate structures between the government and the individual farmer or citizen. There's a whole political tradition that I am very familiar with in the West of pluralism, where we would certainly encourage the importance or assert the importance of civil society organizations as an interface between the government and the individual. But I hadn't even thought about what would be the equivalent of such groups when it comes to ordinary farmers in India. What kind of intermediate institutions were there in the past that you would like to see preserved, or new ones created that would serve that function. If you are worried, and I understand why you would be worried about the loss of structures in between the individual and the state, how do you propose to make up for that problem?
I don't want to propose anything to them because they know what to do. They have had communities since time immemorial, and they have depended on each other for their vocational needs.
But you must be worried that these communities are being subverted or suppressed.
Farmers are a very self-confident lot all over the world. Traditionally, they have been very self-confident lot. Three of the farming communities were known the world over for being notoriously obstinate and self-confident and autonomous. The Russian peasantry, the Chinese peasantry, and the Indian peasantry. Japanese peasantry also some people mention in this context. The Russian peasantry was destroyed by Soviet Russia, and the farmers were targets of Stalin's terror. They were called kulaks, not farmers, because many of them had large farms.
Right.
Chinese peasantry was destroyed in Cultural Revolution. I mean, there was famine is a new instrument of genocide, and the number of famines in the 20th century were, if not directly sponsored by the state, but the states took a passive role.
Yes.
Indirectly responsible. They were not, and the Great Bengal famine, which killed 3 million during World War II, was absolutely artificial because the crop situation was perfect that year. There was no drought or flood that year. But they tried to build a buffer stock for Britain and lifted the entire rice from Bengal.
You're talking about the famine in Calcutta in World War II, right?
1942 years. Not only Calcutta, it killed
all of Bengal. Yes. Okay.
Yes, all over Bengal. Bengal. It was devastated.
I think Marcher Sen has described that, wasn't he? He was a child then there, right?
There's a much more interesting book by one Dr. Madhusri Mukherjee, who is a physicist.
Oh yeah, okay.
On the famine itself, and shows how that famine was artificially created. And in an interview, Lord Mountbatten, in conversation with a friend, admitted that. He did say, because Mountbatten was against lifting any more rice. Indeed, when his interviewer, the friend of mine, a journalist, he asked him, do you hold yourself responsible for the 1 million dead in the partition violence? He said, yes. But when I meet my maker, I will tell him that I did save 1.5 million from death by refusing to load the ships which were waiting to take even more rice and wheat from Bengal, mostly rice. So I will claim that I have 50,000 human lives in.
Well, that's just a cheerful beginning to a conversation. I'm sorry to have plunged us into this very terrible history, but it's certainly something that we shouldn't forget, and we should know more about. I quite agree. One of the projects that we attempt to discuss here in our the project that I'm part of is called Project Save the World, is famines and and of course, the importance of political action or inaction as a cause of famine. So it's very often not caused, of course, by weather or economic problems, but by bad decisions by the government, or by fighting groups, warrior tribes and whatever. Anyway, let's move on to talking about more contemporary issues. And Subir here has been very engaged. Every time we see each other, he brings me up to date with his concerns about the role of Modi in recently starting off an initiative that seems to threaten the whole structure of Indian government, and that is vis-a-vis changing the rules about Kashmir's status in India. Subir, do you want to ask your friends why don't you two discuss this as you would as if you were in his living room now?
I would like to ask Ashish if you could give us your analysis of the change of status and about the criticism that is being voiced by people. I was watching the Hindu parity debate just this morning, and there were two sides to this argument. I want to hear your views. What do you think?
Yeah, a newspaper, okay.
They had the parity discussion. It was the podcast on this. I was watching that this morning. Anyway.
Frankly speaking, the change is not something, need not have been something dramatic, because 99% of Indians do not know or did not know what Article 370 was. If they did not know.
Excuse me, let's explain to our listeners and viewers what Article 370 is. It was
Article 370 is an article which ensures that Kashmir will be a semi-autonomous part of India when it accedes to India, and can frame new law can be framed for Kashmir unless Kashmiris agree with that. Mm-hmm. Kashmir, Legislature of Kashmir agrees with that. What will require, if you want to abrogate it, it was mentioned in the treaty that it will be a temporary arrangement. Someday it will go. And frankly, if you ask me personally, I would say it was already going, in the sense that people had forgotten about it. But this was done this time because elections are coming in Indian assemblies all over India, on each Indian state. And Modi wanted to have a lovely new issue on which to encash his fame as a dynamic prime minister. He thought that this will be very popular with Indians because it will look as if he is a tough administrator who has taken a tough stand vis-a-vis the Kashmiris, because in Kashmir there are often terror attacks, both from the Pakistani side and to some extent from disgruntled Kashmiris themselves. This is the situation. And my feeling is this, that his decision has been very popular in India, and we are a small minority who are opposing it because we understand that this involves a direct humiliation of the Kashmiri people, because they had abrogated a treaty which gave them a sense of autonomy and confidence. Their conventions, their culture, their traditions will be protected. That integration in India will not mean joining a mass society, dissolving in it. Integration in India means that in Kashmir, you retain your identity. There will be no attack on you. You can ensure that you are guaranteed. The central government, through the treaty, through Article 370, guarantees that the Kashmiri identity will be protected.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
hence,
tell me, if you will, sorry, what proportion of the Kashmiri population are Muslim? I understand it's a majority, but is it an overwhelming majority? And what is the condition of relationship between Muslims and Hindus in Kashmir, or what was it until this move was taken by Modi recently?
Kashmir is divided into three parts.
Mm-hmm.
One part, the Kashmir Valley, is predominantly Muslim. The other part, Jammu, it is official name of the state is Jammu and Kashmir.
Mm-hmm.
The Jammu part is predominantly Hindu.
Oh.
And then Ladakh.
The other part used to be predominantly Buddhist, but now probably Muslims have a slight majority.
In Ladakh section.
More or less balanced, you know. I think it is still maybe Buddhist also, predominantly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it is, so in Jammu, there is a minority Muslim community. In Ladakh, there is a, you cannot call it a minority, but some largish Muslim community. But Kashmir Valley itself is predominantly Muslim.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, how did people get along?
As a Muslim majority.
How did the Hindus in Jammu get along with the Muslims in Kashmir? Were there tensions between them, or did they?
Kashmir has never had a communal or religious riot till now. After so many provocations, after so many conflicts, so many disputes, because the Muslims and Hindus constitute a part of the Kashmiri culture. Mm-hmm. In fact, not only were they not divided by religion, but the division itself was smoothened by the fact that often their religious practices included elements borrowed from Hinduism in
each other
and from Islam in Hinduism. Mosques were often shared. The Hindu pilgrimages like Amarnath were discovered and run by Muslims. So it's a place where communal riot and communal division was unknown.
Really?
And today, even Kashmiri Muslims who want to be separate and want to be independent, even today, they pine for the Hindus who have escaped as refugees from Kashmir about 20 years ago. They had to leave because there was fear of terror. They were threatened, and many of them left because by the terrorist groups.
Well, who are the terrorists? I'm confused.
Terrorists are primarily sponsored by Pakistan because half of Kashmir is in Pakistan.
Right. Okay.
Pakistan, in 1947, when India and Pakistan became independent, Pakistan mounted I shouldn't say Pakistan, tribal groups were encouraged to invade India with indirect support from Pakistan army. So the king of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, the threats to the Kashmiri Hindus, the police they're called, about 20 years ago, when they had left Kashmir en masse and are refugees in other parts of India. But the Muslims still want them to come back because the Pandits are an integral, unavoidable part of Kashmir and Kashmiri. Kashmiri identity is not complete either without the Hindus and without the Muslims.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a kind of an integration of Kashmir culture that is transcends the religious divisions.
Yes, it always has done. And even now, there were no religious riots, no interreligious violence in Kashmir. That's a fantastic thing. A state which was so much riven by violence, so much troubled by terror attacks and terrorism. Even in that state, there is no record whatsoever of interreligious violence. But
okay. So now the population in Kashmir, how bitterly are they opposed to Modi's new changes?
The way Modi has shut down telephones, mobiles, telegraphs, faxing, the way he has shut down all institutions, schools, colleges, and other government offices, shows that they were afraid of Kashmiri people. Mm-hmm. And they know that the Kashmiri people will be very upset and angry. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the two major parties, political parties, which have ruled Kashmir earlier, they are both speaking in unison. Both are saying that this is an imposition and Kashmir should be considered now as under military occupation.
Now, which parties are those? Are they parties that are general throughout India, or are they some local party?
Both are local parties, but one of them was in alliance with the party which Modi leads.
BJP.
BJP. So they were ruling Kashmir in alliance with BJP, and the opposition is led by a party which is previously had an alliance with Congress and ruled Kashmir in alliance with Congress party.
Mm-hmm. May I ask you a question about the other factor that you have that has not been covered, and that is the military occupation? That must be a huge provocation for the ordinary citizens.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. And the military's record in Kashmir is not very good. Mm-hmm. Because this is always the case when the population rises in rebellion. If you send the army aggravates the situation instead of solving it.
Exactly.
This was the case in Cyprus. This was the case in Ireland. This was the case in everywhere. Everywhere they have tried to solve this kind of divisions through the army.
The other question I have is, I was talking last night with a person you might know, a mutual friend who will remain unnamed. But I asked him, because he's a supporter, or he believes in what Modi is doing, and he believes that we have for too long mollycoddled Muslims. And I wonder what your rebuttal or comment is on that remark.
What mollycoddled? I mean, the Muslims are one of the poorest sectors of Indian population. They are saying so because Muslims have not supported the BJP. But if you read or in touch with the Hindu rhetoric of the BJP, you will know why it is so.
They're connected, I guess, historically, or I'd like to know about the relationship between the BJP party and the RSS, this militant Hindu, I guess.
Party, it's a party.
It is of a large proportion. They are supposed to have 100,000 branches all over India. In our childhood, it was a sprinkling of such shakhas because they were banned after they were found involved in the killing of Gandhi.
I'm sorry, they were banned after the killing of Gandhi. The RSS was banned. Well, how legitimate is it now? Is it able to function openly?
Supports the BJP and provides it with workers.
It's an
in that
understatement.
public way for a long, long while. Got some indirect legitimacy when Mrs. Gandhi imposed emergency and suspended civil rights in India because they opposed her and joined other opposition parties to fight the emergency, which gave them a certain kind of legitimacy. But now again, they're seen as a right-wing Hindu.
Well, aren't they Hindu? I mean, I thought of them as a very, very extreme Hindu outfit, right?
No, they are not really extreme Hindu. I mean, in fact, the RSS ideology is, you can say, a travesty of Hinduism. But so or you can call it a comic book version of Hinduism. RSS is it wants to reform Hinduism to make it casteless and communityless, and is something like Protestant Christianity. So, a little bit.
But now the RSS is really the ideological grounding for the BJP. Is that fair enough?
Yes. Though I must say also that RSS, they are no great supporters of Hinduism either. Pretend to be so, or to keep the BJP in power, because they think the BJP is a more friendly regime for them to spend their message all over India. And they're a little bit like the Christian right in southern United States.
Okay. Well, sorry, Subir.
I was going to ask you one other question, which is there's been a lot of comments about the close relationship between India and Israel, and the fact that some Palestinians have argued that a lot of the weapons that are used in Kashmir are Israeli weapons, and this is just a symbol of the perhaps ideological, or at least the political sort of sympathies that Israel has with India, and vice versa. The friendship with Israel that India has been considered to be almost like anti-Palestinian. But would you agree with that? Or?
Israel has become the major supplier of arms to India, and many of the techniques, crowd control and management are borrowed from Israel.
Exactly.
The pellet guns they use to blind so many Kashmiri children.
Oh, really?
The Israeli weapons.
Oh, it's pellet guns. Oh dear. Oh dear. Well, now, just more generally, if I can, oftentimes now we hear Modi put into a category along with so many other right-wing anti or authoritarian, let's call it authoritarian regimes, ranging from, say, Bolsonaro in Brazil.
Orban from Hungary.
And Orban and the Poles, and the whole trend, right from Trump on past, that we're seeing an anti-democratic tendency. And I don't know whether to say that Modi's initiatives and intentions are as extreme as sufficiently extreme to warrant putting him into the same category with some of these other people that I would call really, okay, he used the word fascist under his quiet voice. He said fascist, and I will go ahead and say it out loud. Would you want to go so far as to say that Modi's actions or his government's actions are going to be a real threat to democracy in India?
Yeah, I do think that possibility is there. He has very carefully controlled his rhetoric, and though he allows his followers to be as abusive as they can be. But on the whole, he belongs to the category of Erdogan in Turkey, Trump in United States, Duterte in Philippines, and so a whole series of others, as you know, in Austria, in Netherlands, in France, Marine Le Pen, and so on and so forth. So there is this growing threat to democracy, not from outside democracy so much, but from within democracy, because these parties all come to power through democratic means and now are trying to seal the system to make sure that they don't lose power.
Now, the question, I guess, is clearly with Erdogan and his ilk, people who are his political opponents are actually in some jeopardy. They can get, thrown in prison or even worse. And I wonder to what extent Modi's opponents, political opponents, are vulnerable to any kind of pressure or intimidation.
They are under pressure and intimidation and blackmail. They are that. But if they close their ranks, they would be much better off. But they are incapable of doing that either. I don't see any will in them to join ranks and close ranks and provide a united opposition to Modi, even for the sake of electoral.
I had a conversation a few days ago with a man named John Pfeffer at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. He's the editor of their journal called Foreign Policy in Focus, I think it's called. And he called me to talk about a common interest of ours. We've both, in the past, been engaged in transnational civil society organizations, bringing together people from many different countries, talking about international affairs in conferences and so on. And he made a very interesting point, which he's exploring now. He says that progressives or left-wing liberals, such as ourselves, are having a great difficulty about organizing transnational projects. We knew each other in something called the Helsinki Citizens Assembly at the end of the Cold War in Europe. And then there's another example would be the World Social Forum, which both of those are either defunct or in trouble, I gather, weakened. And he says it's very hard for left-wing progressive people to organize transnationally. But he points out something I was not sufficiently aware of, which is that the right wing is succeeding in organizing transnationally at a political level. And he gives the example of Steve Bannon going around Europe and trying to knit together all of these right-wing populist movements in Europe, much as he tried to bring Trump to power here in North America. I wonder whether India is in any sense being engaged in any such transnational movement of right-wing orientation.
No, I don't think they are at the moment. But I do see that there is, in fact, you might say that they are a little afraid of being too closely identified with Erdogan, Duterte, and some of the thugs in Europe also. At the moment, they are not doing that. They don't want to overload the opposition with friends.
Let me ask you one question, though. You mentioned that you don't think But I don't know if you've ever heard of a group called IDU, the International Democratic Union, which is based in Munich. And the current president is our former prime minister here, Stephen Harper. And they are supposedly very supportive of any conservative party around the world. And the last comment I heard, and you can confirm whether there's any validity to this, but they say that the IDU has had a great, a dramatic interest in what's happening in India. Now, is that the BJP RSS supporters who are suddenly finding an ally in the IDU, or have you heard about it?
Modi is also a populist, and therefore doing many things with the businessmen do not like. So there is that part of the story too. But on the whole, the Indian business is fully behind Modi. And any businessman who takes a different stand is virtually ostracized by other business people. My feeling is this, that Modi will try not to lose friends too much by making conspicuous alliances with or the right wing in Europe. He's quite happy as long as he has some kind of a backing from Trump's regime, and as long as he can maintain his alliance with Israel, which goes well with many Americans, also many liberal Americans too. so there he is that way one of the cleverer ones. He is not as dumb as Trump is.
Well, so has he had any dealings with Trump directly? I know I believe he came to the U.S. when Obama was president, wasn't he?
Yeah,
and now I don't know whether he's had any dealings with Trump. What about his dealings with Imran Khan? Have they had a meeting? How do things stand between the two of them?
I don't think it is relationship is bad. He once also went to Pakistan to meet the previous prime minister. But on the whole, he will like to tame Pakistan. By which I mean that he will gradually render Pakistan friendless.
I know a Nepali, a friend of ours from Nepal was saying that the Chinese have been overwhelming them with building roads and helping them with the infrastructure. So they are now almost obligated to China.
But Nepal is also obligated because a huge proportion of Nepalis work in India. Nepali is one of the languages of India. No. So there is that part of Nepal. And do not forget that there is the Hindu card which Modi can always play.
I'm sorry? There's a Hindu card?
Which Modi can always play. I mean, if work comes to us, he can mobilize the Hindus. Nepal is a predominantly Hindu country, though it has a strong Buddhist strand in it. And but there is the Madheshis who stay in the Terai region of Nepal. Their commitment to India is almost total because they are in constant interaction with India. Their children come to here to study, and all Nepalese families have connections in India. So it is very difficult to be unfriendly with India. They can pretend to be, they can be angry with India, and they can grudge India, have grudge against India. They can think that India seeks to humiliate them, but they cannot break with India because of China, because their own people are very much involved in India.
Right.
Well, now, let me ask you again further about this relations with Pakistan. I take it from everything you've said so far that you don't think that the tensions between India and Pakistan are severely worsened by the current move by Modi about Kashmir. That sorry, please, more generally, what can you say about the long-standing and continuing conflict between Pakistan and India?
Yes, I agree that is a problem and that cannot be resolved. But I can also tell you that in the present situation, there is a lot of subtle understanding between Pakistan and India. In the sense that...
What? I beg your pardon? Subtle what?
Subtle understanding.
Understandings, Pakistan
and the rulers of India.
Okay.
Both sides know that the rhetoric the other side uses has underneath it only lust for power. They don't lack substance because neither of the countries need a total war.
Mm-hmm.
And what they want is that this kind of a tense relationship allows them to sell to their own people their version of the story and their version, it's an excellent electoral ploy that they are being very tough with India, or India is based in India. They are being very tough with Pakistan. I mean, Modi had this great success in this last election, partly because of the attack he launched on Pakistan. Data show that ultimately not one person was injured. Indian pilot who had to parachute down in Pakistan because his plane was damaged was returned within a day or two. So there is a kind of a subtle understanding that a total war will destroy both countries. And this quarrel that I have between them allows them to have stronger hold on their own people.
But every now and then there's some sort of outrage. The attack on Bombay a few years ago, and so on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was that do you think that kind of thing occurs with or without the approval and of the regime?
Yeah, we know the attacker. Everybody knows everything. These are countries where no secrets, you cannot maintain any secrets. This is not United States of America or one of the European democracies where there's a lot of secrecy and they can know how to maintain their secrets. Everything is known to everybody in subcontinent.
But if some terrorist group shoots up that hotel and people in Bombay, how much can we assume that the government of Pakistan knew it and was even behind it, supported it? Or is it fair to make any such inference?
Look, let me give an example. Of the Bombay thing is a good example. The person who organized the Bombay attack, planned and organized it, made no secret of it at all. He, from every platform, he announced that in Pakistan. That he is the...
Not beforehand.
This is Syed, who has been designated as an international terrorist by the United States now. Hafiz Syed announced to the whole world that he had organized the Bombay.
After it happened, but not before, right?
After the incident.
After the incident, then he claims credit for it. But they wouldn't have announced it beforehand. It was
not that. Don't look at it that way. The training courses were run by one person, Lakhvi, I think his name was. He was the closest associate of Hafiz Syed. Mm-hmm. Hafiz Syed claimed, it is true that Hafiz Syed claimed that, but government made no effort to hide that. It made no effort to take him into custody or even question him.
Okay.
So it is because it's I mean, some people have to know that he organized it to give him his political power. Otherwise, who cared for Hafiz Sharif?
I see. So they really think that they got a lot of political power in Pakistan from having claimed or acknowledged credit for having done it.
Not only that, the part of the arms comes from the Pakistan army.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what about Imran Khan and his relations with the army? Is he controlled by the army, or how is his relationship different, if at all, from previous heads of government in Pakistan?
It is the nature of politics that those who come to power in Pakistan, once they come to power, try to also make sure that they get more autonomy from the army. That the army doesn't run the state, they have to run the state, and they try to reduce the army's presence there to the extent. So that's Pakistan's problem. I think there's no secret about this. Everybody knows this. But Imran himself has come out quite well from the last and confrontation with India. So I guess that he is a very soft, he may not be an experienced politician, but he has a certain kind of polish and likability and directness, which came out in this encounter. He came out better than the Indian leadership, frankly speaking. Internationally.
India's army has never had anything like the kind of political clout in governing India that the army in Pakistan has over politicians in Pakistan. Is that fair to say? The Indian army has never tried to get...
No, it has not, never played in our role in politics.
But what do you think about the new appointment of a chief of defense staff, which is the most recent thing?
Yeah, they are trying to do that. They are giving an importance to the army, which the army never enjoyed previously. The army top brass is very happy with it, and they are enjoying that fact. And it's difficult for any subsequent regime to reduce the army's presence in public life to its earlier status.
Back to the question of the integration of India, I think the claim that Modi makes for his rationale for the actions vis-a-vis Kashmir is that this is an attempt to create a more universal India, a more integrated society. And I had understood that there's also within his more nationalistic Hindu orientation and supporters that there's a desire or an intention maybe to change the family law system in India, which I believe they make special laws for different religious communities regarding family law, divorce, inheritance, and things of that kind. And that there's an intention to make a single uniform set of family laws for all of India. What do you think of that? And is that a real plan, or is it just talk?
Yeah, it is a plan, and it won't go very far. But on the whole, they espouse all India civil law, universal civil law for India, which I don't think they will introduce, but they will attack some of the more obvious issues directly, particularly if that involves Muslims. Like triple talaq, that 30-second divorce of which many Muslims practice, have just been recently banned in India. Made a cultural
Okay.
And what about multiple marriages? Is that still legal?
Marriage, no, it is not legal technically, but you can forge your papers to show that you are married already before the law was passed. In any, I will also tell you, this multiple marriages is mostly for so many years has been is a myth, because it was a practice which persisted amongst the Muslim elite, ultra elite, I should say, and feudal classes. The most Muslims are so poor they can afford to marry twice or thrice.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the best you can do, and also the data shows that um, the percentage of multiple marriages, polygamy, is there in Islam to the extent of 0.7%.
Oh, so we don't have much to worry about.
And the extent of polygamy amongst Hindus, strangely enough, paradoxically, is 0.8%.
Okay, well, we've got that one handled. This has been extremely interesting, and I'm really, really grateful to you. We'll send you the links when we have a chance. All right. So thank you, and have a good evening. Appreciate it.
My best wishes to you and to Uma.
This conversation is one of the weekly series Talk About Saving the World, produced by Peace Magazine and Project Save the World. Please visit our website at tosavetheworld.ca, where you can sign the Platform for Survival, a list of 25 public policy proposals that, if enacted, would greatly reduce the risk of 6 global threats to humankind. Come back next week for another discussion of a serious global issue.